Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. I am on the phone today with Bartley Harris. Bartley, would you please introduce yourself in your tribal way as much as possible? If it's in your language, great. If it's not, that's fine. Not everybody speaks their language, and some languages are dead.
Yes, thanks, Andrea, for sure. Tanse kakiao kiawao, kitamuskat nawao, Bartley nitsikason, Harris nitspikason, Peguis Manitoba kayate ochinia, Chigi Winnipeg, Igwa Alberta, Niki Peopigan, Phoenix Miigwach Niwigan. That's all. So I just said hello to everybody. I give you greetings. My name is Bartley, last name Harris. I'm from Peguis, Manitoba, is where I'm originally from, and I'm a member of Peguis. And I grew up in Alberta, Canada, actually in a little town called McGrath. And now I live in Phoenix, and that's my short little introduction.
You said that very fluently. Did you speak your language as you were growing up?
No, I didn't, unfortunately. But I have been fortunate to learn a lot on, actually my adulthood. I served a mission in California, Spanish speaking, and that was kind of, in terms of linguistics, an eye-opener for me. I grew up focusing more on sports and things of that nature. I'm sure we'll get into it in this conversation, but I married my wife. She is a Cree person as well, and through my travels and powwow, through my family life, I have focused on language and learned. I'm still learning. The introduction is those are the first things you learn, and so I can rattle some of those things off. And I pride myself in trying to learn different languages. As I served, speaking Spanish, speaking some French, speaking Tagalog of all languages. So there was Tagalog speaking missionaries in my mission, and so I really took a liking to that. My brother served in the Philippines and spoke Tagalog, so languages interest me. But yeah, I've been focusing, reading New Testament and different books in Cree, trying to catch up. It's one of the things that I wish I had growing up, but no, I'm certainly not fluent.
Wow, that's really cool though. I mean, I'm not good at picking up anything, so that's good. Would you share something that you love about your heritage as it relates to the gospel of Jesus Christ? It can be pretty much anything: a story, a celebration, a way of life, a ceremony. What do you love about your heritage as it relates to the gospel?
There's different things. I know you would give me a heads up on this one a while back, and I wasn't sure how I would answer this. I've always viewed my life through the lens of the gospel. I grew up in a little town called McGrath, Alberta, and my parents moved there when I was 3 years old. I was born actually up in northern British Columbia, and so I don't remember that. It's on my birth certificate, and I moved down to southern Alberta. But throughout my life, I was told that about the stories. My parents were in a little branch up in Prince George, British Columbia, and they used to clean out an old Elks Lodge or some kind of bar, is what I was told, on the Sundays, and they would go hold their little branch meeting in there and sing hymns and partake of the sacrament. And then, so my dad was working up there, I think in the mills or something, but their friends moved down to southern Alberta, and I think the influence was, of course, the church, and there's the temple in Cardston, and so McGrath, Raymond, Cardston's a lot of members of the church. And as I was told, my parents were invited by some of the friends that moved down from Prince George. They said, "Come down, we'll help you, build a house, and it was a nice place to live and all that. So they moved down there and built a house, and the gospel was in my life since ever I could remember. And as a my perspective as a Native American, I say Native American because I live in the United States, went to school in the States, but First Nations person, it was just there in the background for me. My mom would always kind of remind me of who I am, and she was, in my mind, she instilled that sense of pride about being a member of the church, and also of being Native American. So it's just, you read those Book of Mormon stories, you learn about this week the lesson was Stripling Warriors, and I happened to teach a primary class, and so I shared with them about the Stripling Warriors, those 2,000 and somewhat young men who went to war and had faith, and based on what their mothers had taught them. And that's kind of how I view my life. So from that lens of, my mother taught me, and of course my dad did too, but my mother had a lot to do with, the gospel upbringing, and whether it was reading from the Friend or singing hymns, that stuck with me. So, but as a Native American person, I look at that introduction to the Book of Mormon and read that it's for us, or it's a record to bring our people to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. And I'm careful with my words sometimes because the Book of Mormon, to me, there's a lot of, I always say there's power in that book. You read it, you can get closer to your Savior, and it will help you with your life. It'll strengthen you. So literally it helps you in your life. But I know that people have different views and histories, oral histories. And so the Book of Mormon, I always say, it talks about the people that it talks about. There may be, and even in the Book of Mormon itself, there was different groups of people that came to the Americas. And so I don't view it as an exclusive or an exhaustive record of the Americas. There's certainly all sorts of histories and things that happened outside of what was recorded in the book. And there may very well be many, Native American people who feel like they're not part of that story. But at the same time, we know that Native Americans, First Nations people traveled and traded and so forth across the continent, North America. And so from my personal view, I view myself as part of the descendants of those people. I feel very strongly about that, and so that's how I view it. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of my take on it.
I love it. I think that definitely answers the question for sure. You said you grew up in Canada, but you're in the U.S. right now. How did this come about?
Yeah, so that's, it's interesting. So when I grew up in Southern Alberta, in the little town of McGrath, some people say it's a bubble. I don't think it's a bubble. It's a protected environment for sure. And it's an environment that, I wish I could replicate for my kids. And I try my best down here to do that. But, we would travel across the border. I remember oftentimes to sporting events. I played, baseball as a youth and American Legion baseball. And we would travel all throughout, Arizona or Montana and into North Dakota, and of course on the Canadian side. And I remember, for example, when the Olympics came up and whatnot, I viewed the United States and Canada as, kind of the same. And at the time, we didn't use any documents or papers to cross the border. I'd go with my baseball team. I didn't even have ID, and I was with my coaches and my teammates, and and other times with my parents going down, and I played hockey in Great Falls and different places, and we didn't use any paperwork. We just drove across. I think the drivers would show their driver's license, if I recall, but I didn't have a passport or anything. And so, I grew up in Alberta, but I didn't really have a lot of exposure outside of, or go travel that much outside of Alberta, and a little bit British Columbia and northern states. And in the summertime, of course, we would go on summer trips to northern Saskatchewan. It's where my mom grew up, and those trips. But how did I get down to Arizona? Well, my first experience outside of McGrath, really outside of southern Alberta, besides what I just mentioned, was I was called to serve a mission in California. And that was, I could go on and on about that, but I served in Spanish speaking in California. That was my first real time outside of Canada. And have these ideas in your mind of what California is when you're a kid, and you hear some people go to Disneyland, and of course we didn't have the means to do that. And I thought I was going to go to this, to Southern California, to the beach kind of thing. But it's considered Northern California, Santa Rosa, and there's vineyards, and it's very beautiful in the summertime, but it's not the beach. It's it's a different place. But what I did know, or what happened, was the weather was really different down there. Obviously, didn't have the harsh winters that we did. And I kind of, from that, a couple of things happened. First of all, I realized, outside of, there's places in the world that didn't get, as cold. And that was appealing to me. So I was like, what am I doing in the winter time in Canada? But the other thing that really happened was, I was introduced to a different languages. And, like I mentioned before, I grew up knowing who I was. I grew up, proud of being, native and mixed. I'm a mixed blooded person. And, but I knew who I was. And I remember playing, sports with, I grew up in Blackfoot territory, I should say, acknowledge that. And Nitsitapi, the people from there, Kainai, Piikani, and the Blackfeet from across the border, and the Blackfeet Confederacy. I grew up in that area, and but I didn't speak my language, and I didn't know a ton about it. I just felt that connection, and we always had folks from the Blood Reserve come to our school, and different tribe, different language. I don't think that they necessarily viewed me as being native, and even though I felt that way, but I maintained some good friendships there, and ended up playing hockey out there. And when you're kids, we were just focused on sports. But as we grew up, and after college, I went back and I was dancing powwow, and I, run into my old friends from high school, and we kind of shared those experiences of our life's path, but also kind of like, hey, I didn't know you dance. I didn't know you're, this and that type of a discussion. So, but in my mission, I kind of, I really wanted to speak Spanish, and I wanted to, and I, my brother had went to the Philippines, and he came back and he was fluent in it. And these other young men, they'd come back from, whether it was Japan or other Spanish-speaking missions, and I just remember as a boy seeing them, bear their testimonies, and I knew them from, watching them play basketball. Mostly it was basketball, but sometimes other sports, but baseball, of course. And I really wanted to be like that. And I went there to the mission, and I really, I had a strong testimony. I wanted to serve. I wanted to be, faithful that way. But, I learned the language really well, so well that I had a little bit of an identity crisis. I really loved the Mexican culture, and, wanted to speak like, without an accent, speak like they did and all that. And then from there, I came back home, and I went to BYU. I was in Provo, and there was a multicultural board at the time. It was an awesome experience. Mostly there were Polynesian folks, some Latin American folks, and then there was a small group of Native American folks in that ward. And I kind of, that was when I was like, started hanging out with the Native students a little bit, but I felt kind of a little bit shy, a little bit not just shy, maybe maybe more, embarrassment, because I didn't know my culture. You know, it wasn't, not never was embarrassed to be Native. I hope that's not taken the wrong. Don't take it the wrong way. I was embarrassed of myself for not learning.
I feel that. I mean, I didn't grow up around a lot of natives either. There's very few that I grew up around, and it wasn't until I always knew that I was different, and I was always proud of being Navajo, but I didn't have the daily influence of that kind of a culture around me. So I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that, and sorry if I get a little bit, choked up about these things, but it was, all these experiences obviously helped me and guided me. And so while I was there, I participated in, as much as I could in the Tribe of Many Feathers. They had their student club, and I played hockey there too. That was a little bright spot, by the way. They had the Ice Cats, and then they were able to use the Cougar name for a little bit. And I don't think the team's there anymore, but I hung out with different folks, um, you know, participating as much as I could. I joined the Living Legends group for one semester, and danced a little bit. And it's interesting because when growing up in McGrath, it's a non-native community. It's there's some diversity there, very little, mostly just regular members of the church, a couple of native families, a couple from different backgrounds. But what they did have there, a really good culture, sense of the community and the gospel, and I share that in a positive way. And I say this to my children. There's different types of culture, and I can go on a lot of tangents here. My university professor, BYU, at Native American Studies, happened to be the brother of my mission president. Last name was Gallons. My president, Floyd Gallons, is my president. But he taught us intro to Native American Studies, and he said, environment dictates your culture. The environment dictates culture. So whether you're up in the north, or you're in the Central America, or you're on an island, that environment dictates how you do things, how you dress, what type of homes you use, and even obviously influences your language. So you get, in the Cree language, for example, you have different dialects depending on what part of the country you were. Swampy Cree, Plains Cree. That environment dictates that. But I grew up in McGrath, and that culture there is a really, really strong, LDS culture, and it's a heritage that I'm proud of, and I want my kids to be proud of. So that and culture can be your family culture, it can be your indigenous culture, it can be your national culture, it can be different things. But when I was at BYU, I felt like I didn't have that culture. But when I joined Living Legends, it was interesting how I auditioned, I guess you call it an audition, was I learned Highland dancing in that town of McGrath. They did Highland dancing, and my mom, she always put us in these different activities. She wanted us to be in sports, to learn the lessons from sports and teamwork and whatnot. She wanted us to be in band so that we could have some musical talent, and she wanted us to learn to sing so we could sing at church and so forth. She really had that vision that the gospel, was carried in the music, and it's true. But I learned Highland dancing, so when I was at BYU, I thought, well, I don't know powwow dancing, but I know a cultural dance, and the audition was you have to just dance a cultural dance. And so I got my mom to make me a new kilt. I got my old swords, and I went back to my teacher, Alice Stevenson. She's an elderly lady, and she was just happy I was interested in doing this, and I relearned how to get up on, do sword dancing. And so I went back and I auditioned, and I made that group, and I started to learn to dance powwow. And you know what, like I felt like I wasn't ready to be the ambassador, and somewhat similar feeling that to come on a podcast like this and talk. But I danced there for one semester, and I said to myself, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to learn this. And so for the past 25 years, well, I had my kids. My oldest is 18. She's heading off to BYU Hawaii this fall. But before I got married, I went out and I danced. I went to powwows, sometimes on my own, sometimes with friends, and I learned the way how to do what I wished I had known as a kid. And it was a humbling experience, but it was what I needed to do, and it was rewarding. So that's what happened. I went to BYU. I went and I learned how to dance, and I went powwowing with my friends every chance, like all summer I would go. And I used to save my numbers. I don't even know, there's too many. And then from there I went to school, finished my degree actually in Southern Alberta, and through some encouragement of some elders there, native elders, and my friends that I was involved powwowing with, they said, you should go to law school. And so I decided I would go to law school, and to be that, to help out, to learn, and to be a leader. I thought I had some things to offer. And so I applied different schools, and I ended up getting into Arizona State University, and they have a wonderful Indian legal program there. And I was fortunate to get in, fortunate to receive, fellowships and assistance through those programs. And, I learned about the law and policy of what affects, First Nations people and tribal people. And again, I was learning this before when I was in Canada and going around to powwows, and I was in school in Lethbridge. I took a class in First Nations governance. And so he taught me, he's like, and he's the one who told me to come down here. So I took that opportunity and came down to Arizona and graduated law school, and I still had that. And we would go home in the summers too. And I ended up getting married during law school. My wife's from northern Saskatchewan, from a Saulteaux-Cree Nation. That means a star blanket. And all my children are enrolled in her band, her tribe. And we would go and visit. And after law school, my last daughter was born right after law school down here. And I just felt this desire to go home. I wanted to go home, wanted to be part of my community. And so I moved my family, and we went to Winnipeg, Manitoba, and never been there before. And I have relatives there, but I'd never been there. And I got to do this. And so it was, and I say that in a, it took a lot. It took a lot, and I'm proud of having taken that chance. And I'm guessing some of my family members will hear this at some point, but that's what you have to do. You have to go there, and it's a sacrifice, but it's also a privilege. And so I went there. I took my kids there. We were able to go, and as it turned out, I worked for one of the large banks in Canada, and one of our clients was my community. And so next thing I know, I found myself out there on the Indian days, at our powwow, and introducing myself, and not knowing anyone there, and telling folks, this is where I'm from, and being just really kind of shy about it. Well, next thing you know, one of my great aunties, she sent some people come looking for me. And they came and they said, hey, you need to come over here and visit. Your Auntie Myra wants to see you. And of course, my uncle had been, in connection. He'd been in contact, and took maintaining those relationships over there. And so they knew who I was and who my family was. And I got to meet, these different folks, and and my Auntie Myra would introduce me to all these different people. And this is your, cousin, and this is your other relative. And it was a real special experience. And she only lived for another couple of years before, and we were up there to be able to go to her funeral at that time. And so that's how I ended up there and learning about my community and working for my community, and taking a position working for an organization, provincial territorial organization called Assembly Manitoba Chiefs. And I worked for, the 63 First Nations in Manitoba. And, with my education and background, I was able to do that. So that opened those doors, and that's kind of the progress of how it went. And I was there for 5 years. But, one thing I noticed that was there is that the church is there. There's a stake there. But it's not like Alberta. It's not like, like Southern Alberta, I should say, clarify. It's not like Utah. It's not like Arizona. The church it's there. They have a temple there. It was announced when we moved there, but it never got built till more than 5 years later. But after 5 years, we moved back to Arizona because I thought I needed to take my family to somewhere where I thought they would, my daughters, where they would have a little bit stronger opportunity for the gospel and education, and also for, of course, I was law trained in the United States, and the cost of living and the quality of life for the types of jobs I can have. We came back, but that's how I ended up in Arizona. Long way around, but we got here, and long way around to tell the story. I mean, but here, that's how I got here. I think that was the question. How did I end up in Arizona? And we were up there for one of the coldest winters on record in Winnipeg. And after 5 years and being in the political scene, as much as I enjoyed it, I just knew my oldest daughter was just about 10 years old, and I didn't want to move them around a lot. And so we came back and, landed eventually in a wonderful ward here. And like I said, my oldest daughter is on her way to Brigham Young University, Hawaii. And got my second daughter. She's going to graduate next year, and a third daughter 2 years after that. So here we are.
I love your story of how you got there, because it sounds like you were being led by the Spirit, and you're showing your family to have faith and to put trust in the Lord. And I'm really impressed with that. That is a good way to live. And I mean, you brought up that this past week we just talked about the Stripling Warriors, and they talked about how their mothers knew it, but their fathers also were every bit as much part of their lives as they were. And you have shown your family that is an important thing too.
Yeah, Andrew, I'm glad you said that, because in the lesson, I talked about the provisions that were sent from their families and their fathers, and that, I think you're 100% on that. It takes entire families, fathers and mothers, and I think I take that very seriously with my daughters. I feel like different things that I've read and learned, that when the father's influence is very important in the children's life, and in particular when it comes to the faith. And so I've taken every effort to try and instill that in them. But I also want to comment, you mentioned that it sounded like I was guided by the Holy Ghost in those different decisions, and I want to say to you and to anyone who listens that that's exactly right. We prayed about the different relocations and things, and we did have especially experiences and timing with the way things worked out, and I can see various numerous different times during those travels that absolutely we were looked over and guided. And I mentioned the ward that we landed in. This isn't the first ward that we came to. When we came back, we were living in a town called Maricopa, south of the city, and we had made some good friends there, but it didn't quite settle with us, and so we ended up going back to a ward called Papago Ward. I understand it's the oldest ward in the valley, and President Hinckley had went there, and different leaders of the church, and said as much. But it's all native ward on the Salt River Indian Reservation. And so we went there and made really good friends there. And, that was an effort also to help my family and to help, and we had went there when we were in during law school, and my wife and I were sealed in the temple in Mesa. And for those folks who went through there, there's some really beautiful murals of northern style Native Americans and southern style Native Americans. When you come out of the celestial room, there's murals on either side of the wall, and that temple was my understanding is dedicated to the Native American people. So, but yeah, each one of these steps, and now in this ward that we landed in, just a wonderful group of people. I think there's one other Native American family in the ward, and a couple different ethnicities, but just wonderful people. I couldn't have imagined a better environment for my daughters. And there was like, I can't remember, there's some with like 30, 40 young women in the ward. And I guess my daughters keep saying they're so proud of, their group of friends, and they go to the girls' camps and they're the biggest group. And that's fortunate. And, for us, for the blessings for us. But I again, reiterate that wherever you are, big ward, small ward, the blessings of the gospel can be the same. But for my daughters, I think they needed this, and they needed that fellowship, and they've blossomed and done really well. So I think that is a blessing and something that I've prayed for and asked for and been blessed with.
Yeah. So where did you find your wife that she's also Cree and a member of the church?
Well, she was baptized a member of the church after we were married.
Oh, cool.
But I met her in northern Saskatchewan. So I went up to a pre-law program in Saskatoon. My older brother was there at the time, and they have a similar program down here, I think in New Mexico. And so I went there, and I had seen her before at a powwow in Saskatoon, but we didn't date until that summer when I went back. And again, I went back after my first year of law school and dated and brought her back. So that's how that happened. There's a little more to the story than that, but we'll put the abbreviated version out there. And
yeah.
But yeah, she's Cree, and my mom told me a long time ago. She said, and I tell my daughters this one. My mom said, if you want to marry a Cree girl, you got to go back to Saskatchewan. But she said to me, she said, what I tell my daughters, that you marry who you date. You fall in love with who you date, and you marry, who you fall in love with. And so I had to go, and if I wanted to marry a Cree girl, that's where you'd have to go pretty much. There's Cree all across Canada, but no, she was from up there. And here's the interesting thing about it. There's no way I would have known this. But we used to go visit my mom's dad up in northern Saskatchewan, about 20 minutes from where my wife grew up. So in the summer times, we drive right by there. Who would have known?
That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. You said that you teach primary right now. Is that like your calling, or were you substituting today?
No, I'm a primary teacher. Yeah, it's been a few months now. I've been called to be a primary teacher. Obviously serving a mission. I've held different callings, and right now that's my calling, and it's enjoyable. I kind of tend to hide out in the back of the chapel in the overflow, but they found me. Here's something else about it too. I moved into this ward, and again, we didn't know where we were just trying to find a house close to the school that we were interested in sending our kids to, which, by the way, one of my daughters went to for 1 year, and then that we ended up, my other daughter didn't want to go there. So we bought this house thinking, this was the plan. But as it turns out, that wasn't the plan at all. I think the plan was, for us to be in this ward. We went in the first day, and there was three other folks that I went to law school with in that ward.
No way! That's awesome.
Yeah, and I knew one of the fellows was a member. I don't recall for the others, but my friend Nick, he's the He's my co-teacher. We both went to law school on JD MBA program together. So small world like that. But I think just another way, I felt comfortable right away with the ward.
Well, that's such a blessing to have that happen for you. Um, how do you know Denton Robinson? He's the one that told me that I should reach out to you. And I know you work a little bit with him, but like, do you work with him or do you occasionally work with him? I don't even know that relationship.
Yeah, so Denton he's an attorney, has his own firm here in Arizona in Phoenix, and so I work for one of the large tribes here in the valley, and I do economic development work, a lot of different contracts and leasing and whatnot. And so Denton, he's been an active member of the legal community, Indian law community, and he does he has through his own firm, he's engaged to do different work with us. So I have regular communication with him. There's a couple of different projects that we're, sometimes, every day of the week on given weeks, but at least probably once a week, Denton and I have conversation about work, and of course, he's just a good guy. I've run into him at different church events. There was the open house here, for example, for the rededication of the Mesa Temple, and we got in line, and there was Denton and his family standing in line there. So, and I got to tell you, it's nice when it overlaps your personal life, your religious life with your work life, when you run into folks and you have that in common with them. It's real comfort.
That's actually a good lead, because I was going to ask you just next. What experiences have you had through your career that have strengthened your testimony of Jesus Christ and or the gospel of the church as we know it?
I would just have to say different answers to prayers. I work as I've described, with tribes and with political leaders, and there's not often that discussions on religion come up. Occasionally, right? It's hard not for people to notice who you are, depending on whether there's invitations to do things on Sunday or what have you, and or you don't participate in indulging in certain beverages or what have you. It comes up, and by and large, people have been very respectful. I've not felt out of place, and I don't think that I've been fortunate to work with a lot of leaders that share those same values, and that's one thing that when I started dancing powwow, the guys that I hung out with, they were very much have those same values. So they took powwow in a respectful way, and that was the reason why they didn't participate in certain activities, drinking and whatnot. And so I was always able to say that too. Why don't you drink? Why don't you do these things? Well, it's because I was younger. I was an athlete. Now I'm a powwow dancer. But behind it all, obviously, is I believe in the word of wisdom, and that. So I don't do that. But I have had many leaders that I work with that, and I think it has to do with just the history of alcohol in Indian country as well, that some people are just stay away from it. And I've had leaders that I've worked with that share that same value. But I would say that, again, it's answer to prayers. I think that along the way, just been needing to provide for my family and to give them that the opportunities that they need, the safe environments at home, safe environments at school, that I feel like my career has, Heavenly Father's guided me and given me those opportunities. One thing, I'll share one story. So during just before the pandemic, I came back down to Arizona, and I'm working for a small firm here, and I went to this law conference, and was at one of the tribes here, there's an Indian law conference, and I got a call from some of my friends back in Manitoba that I was working with, and they said, we want to meet with you. And I said, all right. So I went to meet with them, and they said, what did you think about doing some consulting work for us? We need you to help with some different projects we're working on. And they described to me some of the details of which I won't share here, but I said, that'd be a great thing. And law stresses me out, to be honest. Hey, there's some tough things about it. Took me a long time to really feel like, okay, I'm going to be a lawyer now.
Yeah.
I seem to take that long path. I went up to Canada. I was in politics and banking, but I got to be a lawyer here one of these days. So I think I finally reached that point. But so they gave me an opportunity to do some consulting, and so I was able to fly up there and work remotely, for these things. And so I took a different job at ASU, was able to do a little bit of teaching and some advisory work there. And I had this consulting job. And after a year at ASU, I decided I was just going to do the consulting. And during that year, it's getting to the blessing that I've seen. I was with my daughters every day and taking them to school, picking them up from school, and reading the scriptures. That was a real building block, I would say, turning point. But my daughters have always been good girls, but that really strengthened all of us, and we needed that. We have like I said, we have a blended family. There's always some difficulties, but those hours and those days were the most precious. So I would say that my career gave me that opportunity, and it's a real unique, odd one, because I wasn't getting paid tons of money. It wasn't this, everything wasn't perfect, but when I could really have those moments with my daughters, that was something. I'll always remember that.
Wow, that's beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before I ask you the last question?
Maybe a couple things. Maybe I just want to mention something here. Getting back to growing up in McGrath, and that experience, I value that. It's really, really important, really valuable to me, and I just have to acknowledge, I feel like some really good experiences that were there, and because of that environment, I would just say that going to school in McGrath with all those good young people and the good adults around too, the families there, the parents there were really strived to give us these different opportunities that maybe weren't available to folks in other small towns. They wanted to give us every opportunity that maybe in the cities they had. So whether it was sports or different dancing, different things, we had these, little town of 1,200, 1,300 people. We had an indoor ice arena. Remember when that was built when I was a kid? We got a brand new gymnasium, one of the nicest gymnasiums in the, in the school systems down there. And but I remember a couple of things. Most of my classmates, I would say most, and there's some that weren't, of course. Most of my classmates were members of the church, and we would go to Release Time Seminary. It's one of the few places in the world with Release Time Seminary outside of Arizona and Utah. And we had so many classes. We had a wonderful seminary teacher, Tyler Mandan, and that was just a really uplifting building experience. And I hear sometimes people over my travels talk about, I used to go to church, but it wasn't like cool or this and that. It was where I grew up. It was you felt good to do it. You felt it was the place to be. It was, nobody belittled us. We felt strong and strong together. And whether it was state youth choirs or especially for youth activities, it was just wonderful. And I go back from time to time here because my folks still live in that town, and I see my friends, and some of them have gone on to have, different callings, and and lived really good lives. And I said to my friend, when we were back there, it's that happy reunion, like the sons of Mosiah, when you see your friends and find out that they're still brothers in the Lord, brethren in the Lord. That's from the book of Alma. And so I love those guys, and I feel that way. I feel that way when I come across people that I went to BYU with, if they're still brethren in the Lord, and if they're not, I still love them. But man, it's such a good feeling when you find your friends and they're still carrying on. And, for anyone who hears this, that's where they can know that I am. And, I think for me, I look back and I see like people like my mission president, former state presidents, scout leaders, young men's leaders, advisors, and those guys that helped me build my testimony. And I see that they're still going strong. And, it's such a good feeling. And that's who I strive to be like. And hopefully that, if there was any doubt, people wonder where I'm at, that's where I'm at. And that's my effort and my goal to stay there on that path. So I wanted just to mention that. So hopefully.
I love that. I know when we first were visiting before we hit record, you were not sure where this conversation would go, and I feel like it's gone so many good places, and you've borne testimony of our Savior and of the Holy Ghost and of the scriptures and so many things in just the things that you've talked about. So I just want to end by asking you the final question. What does it mean to you to know that you belong to the tribe of Israel?
For a long time, as I mentioned, I'm mixed blooded, and I wondered about that and whether I was, considered blood of Israel by birth or blood of Israel by adoption. And, we know that whether you're adopted in or whether you're blood of Israel, you're all part of the body of Christ. And so the scriptures, whether claiming you're the blood of Israel, is not really something to brag about, because, Heavenly Father could raise children of Israel up from the rocks, and just paraphrasing the scripture. But from a cultural standpoint, from a self-identity standpoint, knowing who I was or who I am as an Indian person, that was always something that was in my mind. And we have these things in our religion known as our patriarchal blessings, and I was sitting on that answer for years, and it was right in front of me, and it said that by birthright I'm of the tribe of Ephraim. And to me that was very powerful, and I finally picked up on that, to know that it's my birthright. And again, the blessings of Israel flow to those folks, whether by birthright or whether by adoption. And for that matter, if you want to have those blessings, you need to stay faithful. And so I could, as a being of birthright, is a little consolation if I don't follow through with the covenants and stay faithful. But it means everything to me, just to know from a heritage standpoint that yes, it's validation for that. But it means everything in another sense, in that the Book of Mormon is has a deep connection for me, and that it's ancestors and people who my ancestors and relatives, and whatever that proximity is, I just know I'm connected, and so that's what it means to me. I'm thankful for it. I think everybody, has reason to be thankful for their heritage, wherever it comes from. And as I mentioned, for me, I teach my kids that they have heritage through their family, from my side, from my wife's side. They have heritage from the places that they were born, places that they grew up in. But yeah, that's, to me, being from the tribe of Israel, it's something that is very important to me, and I hold it close.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you, Bartley.
Thank you for listening. I was not sure how this would go, but I'm thankful that you gave me the opportunity to share a little bit, and it's been weighing on my mind lately, and hopefully, whoever listens will find something that will help them. But thank you very much. Miigwech.
Hopefully soon I'm going to interview this man. And the way that I found him was at the temple. And I went with some youth, and one of the youth was feeling out of place for a little bit. And we went in, and this guy, I saw him while I was waiting for the youth to come out of the dressing room. But this guy, like if you had passed him on the street and not really, like if you just judged him from first glance, you probably would never have guessed he was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But he was exactly the person the youth needed to meet. So I was watching for him, and I pulled him aside and I said, would you please talk to this person? And he said, yeah, I'd love to. So we met. And it was the exact right time, the exact right person, the exact thing that we needed to have happen to us. And this youth later told me, as we were getting in vehicles, that God must like helping us. God must use us as pawns sometimes, not in a bad way, but in a good way, to help his work progress. And I was like, yes, that is exactly right. So it was pretty cool to have that. And it was a prayer that I had asked as well when we were going, because I knew this youth was feeling out of sorts that day. It was a prayer that was answered for me and I didn't know that was how I needed it answered, and it was so awesome. So I am just bearing witness to you right now that Heavenly Father does use us to help each other, to answer prayers, to strengthen testimonies, to bring us closer together, and to fulfill God's plan. It just made me so happy, and I hope you have a super wonderful, awesome day. Tribe of Testimonies is not sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how this podcast is affecting you. And I'm always looking for guests. If you or someone you know would be a great guest, you can reach me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.